All right, our final panelist tonight is Mary Liz Holberg, State Representative.
A little bit of background. I was appointed to the Planning Commission in the rapidly growing community of Lakeville in 1989. That's when I first became aware of the Metropolitan Council, and unfortunately have followed its actions and antics ever since. This community had the ability to benefit from watching the mistakes of the communities that went before us in their development, but also got caught in the snare of the new utopia, and we're going to have all these wonderful new growth patterns, and because you're more of an empty slate, you're going to get to do it even though we didn't. And after the 1990 census, there was a big uproar. We were having decay in the core. All these people were fleeing the inner cities, and guess what? A lot of them were going to the suburbs, and we couldn't have that. And so we started to see more and more regulations coming out of the Metropolitan Council. These were the days of Myron Orfield. Many of you are probably aware of some of his books, his teachings, if you will. And we also ended up with Ted Mondale, head of the Met Council, in the late 90s. Chairman Bell and I get along well. We respect each other, but have different feelings regarding this agency that in my opinion, is very hidden to the average taxpayer. With the advent of cable TV, you'd think that they might want to record their meetings and put them on local access, kind of let people know what they're doing. They failed to do that. And the accountability factor, given that they're appointed by the governor and not elected, it's kind of one of these kinds of things. And in fact, they in some ways foster lack of accountability at a local level, because if you're a city council member, you can say, well, the Met Council made us do it. And so this idea that we need this appointed 16-member board for the 7-county metro area, when you look at other regions across the country, they seem to function fairly well without this particular style of government. And I always laugh. I say the fastest way to get rid of the Metropolitan Council would be to put in the bill to expand it to the collar counties, add additional 4 counties, and the rest of the legislature might wake up and help us out here, because quite frankly, Met Council issues at the state legislature are basically political footballs, in that there is a subset of the legislature in which it actually affects, and for the rest of the legislature, it's basically trade bait. And so it gets very hard to even enact reforms at the legislature given that particular structure. One of the comments that Chairman Bell stated is, where are these people going to live? Well, hopefully they live where they want to live. One of the things I talk about is, as I go door knocking, one year I door knocked over 10,000 homes in my district, and gee, guess what? I never got to the door of a house, of a $300,000 house on a cul-de-sac, and the homeowner said to me, golly gee, I really wanted to live on a high-density, transit-oriented development, but I just couldn't find the right one, so I got stuck out here on this ugly cul-de-sac in Lakeville with my Rainbow Play system in the back and a great school system. We talk about mission creep. What Chairman Bell didn't tell you, that is, in the 90s they also became landlords. They own property, and their HRA, they're landlords. We have a regional governance structure here appointed by a governor, and in this case a Republican governor, who's in his 3rd term. So if there was any hope for real reform, you would have thought it may have happened, and there has been virtually none in the last 3 years. So this is pretty much, from my perspective, a hopeless situation given a Republican governor and virtually no reform. He talked about the transit system, and that we actually had this governor flip and endorse a rail project, and that's almost too sore of a subject for me to discuss in this environment. I did have some rules my parents told me about language, and I might break those if I stay on that subject. But one of the things is, in the 90s, what we see out of this group, you talk about whether or not it's political. Well, it's appointed, and the transit system gave free rides to the Million Mom March. Now, where's David Strom? Were you ever offered free bus rides for the people that went to the Taxpayers League rally?
I'm sure you know.
Okay, just checking. Chairman Bell talked about comprehensive plans and this process where they update these 4 system plans, and then all the 189 units of government have to scurry around every 10 years to change their comp plans to conform to the new standards, ideals, or great ideas of the particular administration that's in charge at the time. This is very, very, very expensive for communities and taxpayers. It's stressful. They don't know how long these plans are going to be in effect, and quite frankly, they're applied unequally. We saw throughout the 90s an adjoining county not follow the density requirements for unsewered lots, saying that you had to have 10 acres. And so we have an area in which, number one, there's lots of 2.5 acre lots, no future consideration for how you would ever provide services, high water table, lots of wetlands, and quite frankly, communities like ours that have followed the rules are terrified at the time of the environmental degradation or the breakdown of these types of systems that neighboring communities and or the region will be called upon to bear the costs of this type of poor enforcement of standards that were supposedly under the Met Council. In addition, we saw smaller communities within the 7-county metro area grow at very rapid rates to the point that they had raw sewage running in their streets and were sanctioned by the Pollution Control Agency. So now we're considering running a sewer pipe 17 miles out to the very edge of the 7-county metro area to bail out these communities that, never mind poor planning. I mean, the Pollution Control Agency could have stepped in. The Met Council, of course, was not the one that stopped it. It was the Pollution Control Agency that ended up doing it. But you have to ask yourself, how effective is this? And in addition, what we're seeing now, of course, is massive development outside the 7-county metro area. There are different building standards, zoning standards, and as far as regulatory controls for developers, the Met Council, of course, puts in another layer of permitting and run around that it just adds costs. Real briefly, there's been some discussion about affordability, and in the 90s when Myron Orfield was doing all of his, I'm going to rule the 7-county metro area and we're going to have affordable housing for all. The community of Lakeville embarked on a study whereby they took about a dozen different taxing districts within the community, commercial, trailer parks, small size lots, large lots, retail area, and then they calculated the cost of providing services. They went to all the police calls and the cost of the streets, et cetera, plowing, and what they were able to come to as a conclusion that not including your lot, but the value of your structure in early 1990 dollars, if you weren't at $140,000 in your structure, you were not paying your fair share of the cost of receiving services. Well, at that time, the community had lots of 65 and 85-foot lots and was building a lot of smaller, low-value homes, and realized very soon that if they continued along that trend, taxes would continue to go up for homeowners to receive the same level of service, and in turn that they needed balance. In addition, most of the cornfields, the easy development, were beginning to disappear, and with 65 and 85-foot lots, you ended up not saving a single tree in a wooded piece of land because of this density allowed for no recognition of the environmental features of the property or allowing for enough setback to be able to save some of those features. So it's been a constant struggle between communities like mine and the Met Council to be able to grow into what they want to do. Recent trends show that some of our townhouse lands that's zoned for high density, the developers are actually coming in and asking for single family building on that type of density because there's a more limited supply of single family, the prices are going up, the value of the land for single family is higher, and while some would think they'd get more money out of the townhome, they're actually asking to put single family homes on property that is zoned for townhomes. So that seems to be the latest trend, and with all this densification in the early 90s, City of Lakeville was going to grow to 70,000 at build out. The last figure I saw, they're now going to say we're going to grow to 100,000 at build out.